Why is it that the average African knows that George Washington was the first president of America, but they do not know about Steve Biko?
For centuries, Africa's story was written by others, enslavers, colonizers, outsiders who shaped a narrative to control minds and futures. Mainstream media has long painted Africa as broken, helpless, but that's not our truth. We are creators, dreamers, builders. Our ancestors forged empires. Today we're shaping the future, our way. It's time to reclaim our narrative, tell our stories, celebrate our victories. Africans must control the pen that writes our future. Rise up, speak out, the world is listening. Africa's story is ours to tell. Let's write it together.
Now we are landing in O.R. Tambo International Airport. Again, if you haven't visited South Africa, you have to put it on your bucket list. South Africa is an extremely amazing country, and I love South Africa dearly. I can't have enough of South Africa. That particular day, when I landed at O.R. Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg, I wanted to kill some time before I left the airport because I had arrived a bit early. So I decided to walk in a couple of bookshops at the airport. And I remember walking into this tiny little bookshop, probably 3 meters by 3 meters. And one book caught my eye. I literally dove towards that book. You'd have thought there was a scramble for the book. This book, the title was, I Write What I Like. I just loved the title, even before I knew who wrote the book. But I didn't have to look at the name of the writer of the book because I knew that face. I knew that face so much because this face belonged to somebody who is one of my role models. In fact, I credit him for the title of this show, African Awakening, because this guy, although they took him out, they took his life when he was only in his early 30s. And I have never forgiven the apartheid regime for doing that. I'm talking about Steve Biko. I remember taking that book, paying instantly, and I was late to leave the airport to go to my hotel because I had to read chapter 1 of the book. I was so eager to understand why Steve Biko was the person that he was. And this book is not about him, it's from him, in his own words. Now, when you look at Steve Biko, one of the tragedies of contemporary Africa and contemporary Pan-Africanism is the fact that a lot of the people in today's Africa, irrespective of their age, are forgetting about Steve Biko. Yet, they are not forgetting about many of these Western heroes that we learn about in our schools. They are not forgetting them, but they are forgetting about Steve Biko. So I'm going to seize this chance before I continue to challenge all the curriculum developers across Africa. You have got to integrate Pan-Africanism into your studies from primary school to the university level. Because Africans must never ever forget people like Steve Biko, but they will if it is not part of our education. Why is it that the average African knows that George Washington was the first president of America, but they do not know about Steve Biko? It's unacceptable, it's unconscionable. So I challenge African countries that seem to have leaders who are true Pan-Africanists of today's Africa, countries like, of course, Burkina Faso, countries like Namibia. Namibia seems to have a very powerful lady who we are praying is going to be a transformative leader. Botswana with Duma Boko. I challenge those 3 countries and others to make it very clear that they are going to integrate Pan-Africanism into primary school education and secondary school education so that the upcoming generation of Africans can be truly Black, conscious of who they are. And the reason I say that at this juncture is because Steve Biko was the founder of the Black Consciousness Movement. This Black Consciousness Movement, as the name suggests, he also believed that if the Black consciousness becomes increasingly stronger, then the people of South Africa would be able to defeat apartheid. He believed that you've got to be proud of who you are as a Black person. He believed that without Black consciousness, then Africans themselves will continue looking at themselves as inferior, whether consciously or subconsciously. Now, the sad reality is this: today's generation of Africa needs that message more than ever before. Something as simple as kinky hair. Kinky hair is one of the most powerful crowns on this earth. But a lot of times, you find people regarding kinky hair as something that has to be treated, something that has to be addressed or corrected. You may say that it's for pure cosmetic purposes, but when you're talking about Black consciousness, it means being proud of every inch of your body, every inch of a psyche as a Black person. And Steve Biko became so powerful with his Black consciousness message that he inspired a generation of teenagers in Soweto to rise up in the famous Soweto uprising. He inspired them to do so. Teenagers, let that be a challenge to today's youth here in Africa, that your time is now. It is no longer tomorrow, but it is now. Your time to rise up and demand good governance, transformative leadership is now. Your time to rise up and speak against the injustices across the continent is now. It is not tomorrow, it is now. But you can only do that if you embrace Black consciousness. And Black consciousness is simply the African awakening of Africans themselves beginning to believe that they are more than worthy, that they are priceless, that we are priceless. If anybody in this world should feel superior, it is actually Africans, because we're the cradle of mankind, we're the cradle of humanity. So we must continue with that battle from where Steve Biko left it. To understand more about the sinister forces that are against Africa, that I promised you will become clear by the end of this show, ask yourself, why would a regime kill a 31-year-old Black South African who was not even shooting anybody, who was not even violent? Why would they jail him, take him to prison, torture him and kill him? Why would they do that? They must have known something that you and I need to know and embrace. They knew that Steve Biko's message of Black consciousness was the one thing that was going to make a vast difference in Africa, was the one thing that was going to transform South Africa. If the Black consciousness that Steve Biko preached, if that Black consciousness, if that message had not been lost, then I dare say that the inequality we see today in South Africa would not be there. Because South Africans, Black South Africans, would have understood that power is not given, it's taken. And it's not just about political power, it's also about economic power. And how do you take economic power? If you're conscious of your Blackness, then you take economic power by deploying the totality of your assets, the totality of your potential. You deploy that, and then you take economic power. In South Africa, they took political power, but they didn't take economic power. And to date, South Africa remains the most unequal country in the world. Steve Biko would shudder in the grave. The good news is that we can correct that by integrating Black consciousness into everything that we do in today's Africa. We must be proudly Black, and we must go beyond the semantics and realize that Black consciousness is not about putting down any other race, but it is about lifting ourselves into the full potential of who we are. And more specifically in today's Africa, it is about taking economic power. It is unacceptable that nearly half of the people in sub-Saharan Africa, about 600 million people, continue to live in multi-dimensional poverty. It is unacceptable. And we must not accept that as business as usual. It must be business unusual in today's Africa by us embracing the Black consciousness that will take us forward economically. Before we move away from South Africa, I want you to know that we will come back to South Africa in this show. We're going to finish with another South African leader. But before we move away from South Africa to go to a country that I deeply love, again, let me urge you, every Thursday, do not miss to tune in for the Africa Awakening Show. Do not miss to tune in for the African Awakening Show. I credit Steve Biko for that title because the African Awakening stems from the Black consciousness. And I say thank you very much, Steve Biko. The best honor that we can pay this young leader of Africa who was taken away too soon is to ensure that wherever sector you're in, whatever it is that you do with your life as an African, whether you're a business person, whether you're in career, whether you're a student or a politician, make sure that you nurture the Black consciousness, without which it's so easy to go through life looking at yourself as lesser.
The most important person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs.